Ethan had always considered himself a man who trusted easily, perhaps too easily. Marriage to him was built on a foundation of complete honesty, of having no secrets between husband and wife. For years, he believed his life with Claire was exactly that, stable, predictable, and filled with the kind of quiet love people envy from afar. But then, small cracks began to appear in that perfect picture. It started one night, when Ethan returned home later than usual from work. The house was dim, and Claire was in the living room, her phone pressed tightly to her ear. She didn't hear him enter, and he froze in the doorway, just outside the glow of the lamp. Her tone was hushed, the words clipped and deliberate, as though she were speaking in a language of caution he had never heard from her before. He couldn't make out the full sentences, just fragments, enough to send a gravity he didn't recognize. When she noticed him, she startled, fumbling to end the call. She smiled too quickly, too brightly, and said it was nothing, just a wrong number. But Ethan knew it wasn't nothing, and that smile didn't reach her eyes. Over the next few nights, the pattern repeated. Claire would excuse herself after dinner, claiming to be tired, or that she had emails to catch up on. Ethan would stay downstairs, pretending to be engrossed in the television, but his ears picked up the faint sound of her voice drifting from upstairs. He noticed how she always locked the bedroom door when she took those calls, a habit that made his chest tighten. She had never locked him out of anything before. He found himself staring at the ceiling late into the night, every murmur from the upstairs room replaying in his mind. Ethan wanted to believe there was an explanation. He told himself maybe she was planning something, perhaps a surprise for his upcoming birthday, or maybe dealing with something private involving her family. But those reassurances grew weaker each time. He caught the flicker of guilt in her eyes when she rejoined him after a call. He had been married long enough to know the difference between a harmless secret and a dangerous one. Claire was hiding something. He could feel it, like a weight pressing against his ribs. One evening, after she had gone to bed, Ethan lingered downstairs with his thoughts swirling. The clock ticked past midnight, and he heard her voice again, muffled but urgent. He crept up the stairs, his heart hammering louder with each step. He stopped outside the bedroom door, holding his breath as he strained to catch a word, any word. His hand hovered over the doorknob, but he didn't dare turn it, knowing she had locked it again. All he caught was the tone, sharp, worried, and not at all the voice of a woman simply chatting with a friend or a relative. Doubt seeped into his veins like poison. He found himself watching her more closely during the day, cataloging her behavior in a way that made him feel like an intruder in his own home. She laughed less around him, seemed distracted during their conversations, and her phone was never far from her grasp. It was always face down on the table, as if she couldn't risk him glimpsing the screen. Ethan tried more than once to bring it up casually. He would ask who she'd been talking to, if everything was all right. Each time, she waved him off with excuses. Work, her sister, even a charity she claimed she was helping out with. Her answers never matched her tone, and the wall between them thickened with every lie she told. The worst part wasn't the secrecy itself, but the gnawing silence it left in its wake. Ethan began to feel like a stranger in his own marriage. Nights became long, cold stretches of listening for the vibration of her phone, of watching her slip away piece by piece. He wanted to confront her outright, demand to know the truth, but something in her demeanor made him hesitate. It wasn't just fear of what she might admit. It was fear of shattering the illusion he still clung to, the illusion that their marriage was unbreakable. Still, suspicion has a way of consuming a man, and Ethan was no exception. He began replaying moments from the past in his mind, searching for signs he might have missed. The nights she claimed to be working late, the sudden trips to visit friends out of town, the time she avoided direct eye contact when he asked simple questions. All those little inconsistencies, once ignored, now pieced together into a chilling mosaic that kept him awake until dawn. He realized with a heavy ache in his chest that maybe he had never truly known his wife at all. The phone calls were only the beginning, but to Ethan, they were the signal that something dark lurked beneath the surface of his marriage. A shadow had entered their home, and it followed him everywhere, whispering doubts and feeding his restless thoughts. Each ring of her phone felt like a warning bell. Each hushed conversation, another nail driven into the coffin of his trust. Ethan's world, once so steady, was beginning to tilt, and though he didn't yet know the full truth, he could already sense that whatever his wife was hiding had the power to destroy everything he believed in. Ethan couldn't shake the unease that gnawed at him after weeks of hearing Claire's secretive late-night phone calls. He told himself that if she truly had nothing to hide, then she wouldn't be so careful, so guarded. One Saturday morning, when Claire left the house to run errands, Ethan finally acted on the suspicion that had been festering inside him. His heart pounded as he walked toward the bedroom, the one place where Claire had recently begun spending hours behind a locked door. He knew he was crossing a line, but trust had already been broken. Her behavior had made sure of that. He started with her desk drawers, rifling carefully through the neatly organized folders and papers she had always kept in perfect order. At first, there was nothing unusual: utility bills, insurance statements, old receipts. But in the back of the bottom drawer, beneath a pile of outdated files, his hand brushed against something different. A small black pouch, zipped tightly shut. Ethan hesitated, his breath catching in his throat, before pulling it free. Inside was a slim key, one he had never seen before. It was oddly familiar, like the kind used on a personal lockbox or a private file cabinet. His pulse quickened. He began searching the room with new purpose, and within minutes, he noticed the faintest scuff marks on the floor near the corner closet. Kneeling down, he pushed aside a stack of boxes, revealing a small metal lockbox wedged against the wall. His chest tightened as he slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. He hesitated again, part of him screaming not to open it, not to uncover something that might change his marriage forever. But his hands moved on their own, twisting the key until the lock clicked open. Inside, Ethan found a neatly arranged stack of documents. The top folder was labeled with a name he didn't recognize. He opened it, scanning the pages quickly, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. Bank statements. Large sums of money being transferred to an account he had never heard of. He turned to the next set of papers. Old IDs with Claire's photograph, but under different names. His heart lurched painfully in his chest. Why would his wife have multiple identities? Why had she hidden these things from him? Each document seemed to cut him deeper. There were letters too, some written in a hurried hand, signed by people Ethan didn't know. One of them spoke of debts. Another hinted at promises Claire had made that Ethan couldn't begin to understand. The woman he thought he knew suddenly seemed like a stranger. As he sat there, paper spread out across the floor, his hands trembled. He felt the air grow colder around him, as though the house itself was no longer the safe haven it had always been. Everything he believed about his wife, her honesty, her stability, her love, was suddenly called into question. Ethan stuffed the documents back inside the box when he heard the faint sound of her car pulling into the driveway. Panic surged through him. He locked the box again, pushed it back behind the closet, and returned the key to its pouch just in time. When Claire entered the house, smiling casually, Ethan forced himself to act normal, but his heart was still racing, his mind still screaming with the truth of what it found. He could no longer dismiss her behavior as harmless. His wife was hiding something dark, and the papers in that lockbox were only the beginning. The secrets she kept weren't just personal. They were dangerous, and Ethan knew they had the power to unravel his entire world. Ethan tried to convince himself that the papers he had uncovered might have some kind of explanation, but deep down he knew the truth was far more sinister. His wife wasn't just keeping secrets. She was living a double life. That knowledge sat heavy on his chest, a constant reminder that the woman he shared a home with might not be the woman he thought he married. Still, nothing could have prepared him for what came next. It started subtly, the way danger often does. A figure began appearing in places that made Ethan's skin prickle with unease. One evening, while returning home from work, he noticed a man standing across the street from their house. The stranger was tall, broad-shouldered, with a cap pulled low over his head. He wasn't doing anything, just leaning against a lamppost, watching. At first, Ethan dismissed it as coincidence, maybe someone waiting for a ride. But when Ethan pulled into the driveway, the man didn't move, didn't even glance away, as if his presence was intentional. By the time Ethan turned his back for a moment and looked again, the man was gone. Over the following week, Ethan spotted him more than once. Always near their home, never too close, but always there. Once, as Ethan walked the dog late at night, he saw the figure lingering at the end of the block, the glow of a cigarette tip burning in the dark. Another time, while leaving the grocery store, he caught a glimpse of the same build, the same cap, disappearing behind a row of parked cars. Ethan's instinct screamed that this wasn't random. Someone was watching them. The fear turned into suspicion when he realized Claire never seemed surprised or unsettled by the presence of the man. In fact, once, as Ethan pulled into the driveway and saw the figure vanish into the shadows, he glanced at Claire through the window. She had been standing by the curtain, her expression tense, as though she knew exactly who that man was. When she saw Ethan looking, she quickly stepped back, her face rearranged into a practiced smile. But Ethan had caught it, that flicker of recognition in her eyes. That night, Ethan lay awake, replaying every detail. Who was this man? Why was he always around, yet never approaching? And why did Claire look as though she wasn't surprised to see him? His mind kept circling back to the lockbox, the documents, the alternate IDs. Were they connected? The thought chilled him to the bone. Maybe this stranger wasn't just watching the house. Maybe he was watching her. Ethan couldn't shake the sense that the man's presence was a warning, a shadow hovering at the edge of their lives, waiting for the right moment to strike. Each time he stepped outside, he found himself scanning the streets, his pulse quickening at the thought of seeing that figure again. He knew it wasn't his imagination. This was deliberate. Someone wanted him uneasy. Someone wanted him questioning. And Ethan had no doubt that Claire was at the center of it all. The mysterious man was no longer just a stranger on the street. He was a piece of the puzzle, a key to the secrets Claire had buried so deeply. And Ethan, whether ready or not, was about to uncover just how dangerous those secrets truly were. Ethan's unease reached a breaking point one rainy Thursday night. For weeks, the strange man's appearances had gnawed at his sanity, and Claire's late-night phone calls had grown more frequent, more desperate in tone. Ethan knew he couldn't sit back anymore. He had to know the truth. So when Claire told him she was heading out to meet a friend for coffee, he didn't argue. Instead, he waited 5 minutes, grabbed his jacket, and quietly followed her into the night. He kept his distance, careful not to be noticed, his headlights dimmed as he trailed her car through winding streets. The rain made it harder, streaking across his windshield, but he forced himself to focus. Every turn she took felt deliberate, as if she wasn't just going to meet someone casually. Claire wasn't heading toward the cafe she usually mentioned. Instead, she drove toward the outskirts of town, where the neon lights of motels and truck stops lined the road. Ethan's grip on the steering wheel tightened, his chest constricting with each passing mile. Finally, her car slowed and pulled into the lot of a hotel, a modest but discreet place, the kind that catered to people who didn't want to be seen. Ethan parked a few spaces back, heart hammering in his throat as he watched her step out of the car. She wore a long coat, her collar turned up against the rain, but even from a distance he could see the way she glanced around nervously, scanning the parking lot before hurrying inside. She wasn't meeting a friend for coffee. She was hiding something much bigger. Ethan sat frozen in the driver's seat, raindrops pelting the roof like a drumbeat echoing his rage. His thoughts spiraled. Was she meeting the man who had been watching their house? Was she involved in something criminal? Or was it worse? Was she here for something intimate, something that would shatter their marriage beyond repair? Every possibility was a knife twisting deeper into his chest. Minutes passed like hours. Ethan debated whether to storm into the hotel and confront her on the spot or wait to see who she was meeting. His better judgment told him to stay hidden, to gather evidence before making a move. He turned off his engine and watched the blur of the rain-streaked windshield, his breathing shallow, his body coiled with tension. Then he saw it, a figure emerging from the shadows of the hotel entrance, pulling a hood low over his head. Ethan's blood ran cold. The build, the posture, the quiet confidence in his stride. It was the same man who had been haunting their neighborhood. The same stranger he had seen smoking at the corner, watching their home like a predator circling prey. And now, here he was, meeting Ethan's wife in a hotel. Ethan's stomach churned as he watched them disappear together inside. He gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white, every muscle in his body straining against the urge to burst through those doors and demand answers. But he forced himself to stay put, to swallow the storm of emotions raging inside him. Confrontation now would get him nothing but lies. What he needed was proof, undeniable proof of whatever dark truth Claire was hiding. He leaned back in his seat, rain blurring the neon hotel sign into a smear of color, and made himself a promise. This night wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. He would follow her deeper into the shadows she thought she concealed. And when the truth finally came out, it would not only break her facade, but also set the stage for the revenge Ethan was already beginning to plan. Ethan waited in the car, the rain masking his heavy breaths as he watched the door of the hotel. Minutes dragged by, each one stretching like an eternity. He kept expecting Claire to walk back out, but she didn't. Instead, the hooded man returned briefly, glancing around the parking lot with Predator's awareness before disappearing inside again. The sight made Ethan's chest tighten. This wasn't a casual meeting, nor was it something innocent. Something about the man's movements, the way he surveyed the surroundings, screamed secrecy and danger. Ethan knew then he couldn't leave until he uncovered what was happening behind those walls. Eventually, his patience snapped. He couldn't sit idle any longer, not with his mind running wild with images of betrayal. He slipped out of the car, hood pulled up, and crossed the parking lot, keeping close to the shadows. The hotel's sliding doors parted with a mechanical chime, and he stepped into the dimly lit lobby, the scent of damp carpet and cheap air freshener clinging to the air. At the front desk, a clerk barely glanced at him, too busy scrolling through his phone to pay much attention. That worked in Ethan's favor. He moved past casually, pretending to check a vending machine, then slowly drifted down the hall toward the elevators. From there, he listened. Voices carried faintly from one of the rooms nearby. He pressed himself against the wall, straining to hear. His heart thumped like a drum, each beat drowning out the words, but then, clearer now, he caught fragments. Claire's voice. It was unmistakable, softer than usual but laced with tension. The man's voice followed, deeper, more commanding, like he was giving instructions. "You promised no one would find out," Claire whispered, her tone edged with fear. The man replied, his words chilling in their certainty. "As long as you keep up your end, no one will. But if you slip, everything comes crashing down, for both of us." Ethan's stomach dropped, his blood turning to ice. What were they talking about? What promise? He leaned closer, desperate to hear more, but the muffled sound of footsteps in the hallway forced him to retreat. He ducked into a small alcove near the stairwell, holding his breath as a maid pushed her cart by. Once she was gone, he returned to the spot, only for silence to greet him. They had either moved further inside or stopped talking altogether. Frustration gnawed at him. He hadn't heard enough to understand the full picture, but what he had heard was enough to confirm that this wasn't about an affair. It was something far more sinister. Claire wasn't merely betraying him as a wife. She was tangled in something secret, something dangerous, and now he was certain the man he'd seen lurking around their house was involved in it. He backed away, his thoughts a storm of confusion and fury. The betrayal was no longer abstract. It was alive, breathing in that very room. Ethan wanted to burst in and demand the truth, but instinct told him it would be reckless. If the man was dangerous, and every fiber of Ethan's being screamed that he was, then a confrontation now could spiral out of control. He needed to be smarter, colder. Ethan returned to his car, his soaked jacket clinging to him as he collapsed into the driver's seat. His reflection in the rain-streaked glass looked like a stranger's, haunted, furious, but determined. He had always believed betrayal would come in the form of infidelity, but this was different. This was a conspiracy, a secret life his wife had guarded for years, one that could ruin not just their marriage, but everything Ethan thought he knew about her. As he sat there in the dark, the words he overheard repeated in his mind like an echo. "If you slip, everything comes crashing down, for both of us." Ethan didn't know what Claire had gotten herself into, but he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer just a husband trying to protect his marriage. He was a man standing at the edge of a truth so devastating it could destroy everything, and the only way forward was to expose it, piece by piece, lie by lie. The night after the hotel incident, Ethan couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Claire's voice, frightened, almost pleading in the man's cold, commanding reply. His mind churned restlessly, caught between fury and disbelief. The lockbox had already revealed she lived a double life, but hearing her with that stranger had cracked open something darker. Ethan knew he needed more than fragments and overheard whispers. He needed undeniable evidence. The next morning, while Claire was in the shower, Ethan crept into the attic where they stored old boxes of keepsakes. She had been oddly protective of one particular trunk over the years, always insisting that it was just family junk. Normally, Ethan respected boundaries, but now those words felt like another lie. Kneeling on the dusty floorboards, he tugged the trunk forward, its heavy lid groaning as he pried it open. At first, it seemed harmless enough. Stacks of photo albums, yearbooks, and envelopes filled with letters yellowed by time. But as Ethan sifted through them, his pulse quickened. Tucked between a pile of family photos was an envelope marked with a name he didn't recognize. Inside were photographs, but not of family vacations or holidays. These were grainy images of Claire, younger but unmistakably her, standing with people Ethan had never seen before, rough-looking men with tattoos, women with hardened eyes, all of them radiating a sense of danger. In one picture, Claire was holding stacks of cash. In another, she stood beside the same hooded man Ethan had seen at the hotel, though his face was clearer here, stern, sharp-eyed, and far too familiar for comfort. Ethan's hands trembled as he shuffled through the photos, each one painting a picture of a life she had buried deep. Then he found a small leather-bound journal, the cover worn from years of use. He opened it and scanned the pages, his heart sinking as he read hurried notes about payments, debts owed, and references to jobs that sounded less like employment and more like criminal operations. Phrases like "keep him in the dark" and "don't let him know" leapt out at him, confirming what he already feared. She had been keeping him blind on purpose. And then there was a final blow. A folded piece of paper slipped from the back of the journal, fluttering to the floor. Ethan picked it up, unfolding it slowly, his breath catching when he saw the words. It was a copy of a birth certificate. Claire's, but the name wasn't Claire. It was an entirely different identity. The woman he thought he married didn't even exist, not legally. She had reinvented herself, shedding her past like a snake sheds its skin, and he had been too blind, too trusting to ever notice. Ethan sat frozen, the documents spread around him like shards of glass. His mind replayed every memory of their years together, now warped and poisoned by the knowledge that none of it was as it seemed. The warmth in her smile, the softness in her voice. Were those ever real? Or had she been performing all along, weaving a careful illusion to keep him from looking too closely? The sound of the shower cutting off jolted him back to reality. He scrambled to return the photos and journal to the trunk, shoving everything back exactly as he found it, though his shaking hands betrayed his panic. By the time Claire came upstairs, wrapped in a towel and humming softly, Ethan was already downstairs in the kitchen, pretending to make coffee, his heart hammering against his ribs. But something had changed in him. The love he once clung to had been replaced by something sharper, harder. The woman he thought he knew was a ghost built from lies, and now that he had seen glimpses of her true past, Ethan realized there was no turning back. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore. It was woven into the very fabric of her identity. She wasn't just hiding secrets. She was a secret. Ethan carried the weight of what he had discovered like a stone crushing his chest. The photographs, the journal, the false identity. They had already obliterated his trust, but he needed to hear the truth come from Claire's own lips. He couldn't live another day pretending everything was fine, while a storm of lies raged beneath the surface. One evening, as they sat at the dinner table, he watched her carefully. She smiled, asked about his day, poured him a glass of wine as though nothing were wrong. But to Ethan, every gesture looked rehearsed. Every word tasted like poison. He set his fork down and studied her face. "Claire," he said slowly, "who is he?" The question made her freeze. For a fraction of a second, her mask slipped, the way her hand tightened around her glass, the flicker of panic in her eyes. She recovered quickly, laughing lightly as if he had told a joke. "Who?" she asked, her voice too casual. "The man at the hotel." Ethan pressed, his tone sharp. "The one who's been lurking around our house. Don't lie to me. I saw you." Her smile faltered, and her gaze dropped to the plate in front of her. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Finally, she looked up, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. "It's not what you think," she whispered. "Then tell me what it is," Ethan demanded, his voice shaking with restrained anger. "Because I found things, Claire. Documents, photos, even a different name. Do you think I wouldn't notice? Do you think I'm blind?" Her breath hitched, and she leaned back in her chair, her facade cracking further. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "I did it to protect us. To protect you." Ethan's heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear his own words. "Protect me from what? From the truth? From knowing who my own wife really is." For the first time since their marriage, Claire looked small, fragile, as though the weight of her past had finally caught up with her. She reached across the table, her hand trembling. "Ethan, please. I can't explain everything. Not yet. If I tell you, it'll put you in danger too." He pulled his hand back, his jaw tightening. "I'm already in danger, Claire. You made sure that the second you started hiding this from me." She flinched at his words, her shoulders sagging under the accusation. Then, as if regaining strength, her eyes hardened. "I've made mistakes," she admitted. "Things I can't undo. But not everything you think is true. Some of it you don't want to know." Ethan stared at her, searching for the woman he once believed in, the woman who used to laugh with him late into the night and share secrets under the covers. But all he saw now was a stranger who perfected the art of half-truths. Every word she spoke sounded like another layer of manipulation, another attempt to keep him in the dark. The conversation ended with Claire insisting he trust her without answers, and Ethan pretending, for the moment, that he might. But inside his resolve hardened. If she wouldn't give him the truth, he would drag it into the light himself. No more waiting, no more hoping she would come clean. Whatever game she was playing, Ethan was done being a pawn. He would uncover every detail, even if it meant tearing apart the very foundation of their marriage. And when he did, Claire would have no place left to hide. The days after their confrontation became a tense, suffocating blur. Claire acted as though nothing had happened, slipping back into her role as a perfect wife. Smiling at the right times, cooking his favorite meals, leaning in for kisses that now fell hollow. But Ethan wasn't fooled anymore. Every affectionate gesture felt like a distraction, every soft word like a trap designed to keep him from digging deeper. He knew she was hiding something monumental, and his patience was running out. Then came the moment that ripped away any lingering hope that this was all just paranoia. One Monday morning, Ethan logged into their joint bank account, intending to pay the mortgage, but the numbers on the screen didn't make sense. His heart skipped. Half their savings, money they had carefully built together over years, was gone. Entire transfers had been made, not in small amounts but in massive sums, siphoned quietly into an account he had never seen before. Ethan's hands trembled as he clicked through the transaction history. The transfers had been happening for weeks, small amounts at first, then larger ones, always late at night when Claire claimed she was working on emails. The account receiving the money bore a name he recognized instantly, the same name he had seen on the documents inside the lockbox, one of Claire's alternate identities. He sat back in his chair, his stomach churning. This wasn't just betrayal in an emotional sense anymore. She had stolen from him, from their future. Vacations they'd planned, the dream of buying a bigger home, even an emergency fund they'd sworn never touch. All of it was being drained for reasons she refused to explain. The Claire he thought he knew, the woman who once promised to build a life by his side, had gutted him financially without hesitation. when he confronted her that evening, she didn't even bother denying it. Instead, she looked at him with those wide, tearful eyes and whispered, "Ethan, I had no choice. If I didn't send that money, things would have gotten worse. You don't know what they're capable of." Her words sent a chill through him, not because they explained anything, but because they raised even more terrifying questions. Who were they? Why was she funneling their savings into secret accounts under false names? And how long had she been preparing for this? Ethan realized then that he was living with someone who was not only capable of deceiving him, but also capable of dismantling his entire life without a flicker of remorse. Whatever danger she was entangled in, she had dragged him into it too, whether he wanted it or not. That night, lying awake beside her, listening to her steady, practiced breathing, Ethan stared at the ceiling and made a silent vow. She thought she was in control, weaving lies and draining their future. But she was wrong. She had underestimated him. The betrayal had gone too far, and Ethan knew he could no longer play the role of the oblivious husband. The time for waiting was over. The time for revenge had begun. Ethan had spent weeks gathering every piece of the puzzle, moving carefully in the shadows just as Claire once had. The lockbox, the hotel meetings, the old photographs, the false name, the stolen money, all of it painted a picture of a woman he could no longer recognize. She had betrayed him in ways that cut deeper than infidelity. She had stolen his trust, his future, and twisted their marriage into nothing but a disguise for her secret life. And now, it was his turn to strike back. He began quietly, documenting everything. Copies of the bank transfers, photos of the lockbox contents, and recordings of the hushed conversations he managed to capture from outside the hotel. Each detail became a weapon, each fragment of evidence another nail in the coffin she had built for herself. He didn't confront her again. He let her believe he was still blind, still stumbling in the dark while he prepared his move. The night came when Claire announced she had to visit her sister out of town. Ethan's pulse quickened because he knew exactly where she would go. He followed her car in silence, headlights dimmed, until she arrived at the same discreet hotel. But this time, Ethan didn't wait outside. He moved with purpose, slipping into the lobby and up the stairs, stopping just outside the room where her voice carried. Through the door, he heard her speaking to the hooded man, her tone sharp, filled with urgency. "The money's nearly gone," she hissed. "I can't keep this up much longer." He's starting to suspect. Ethan smiled bitterly in the shadows. She had no idea he had already unraveled every lie. He stepped back, pulled out his phone, and sent the message he had been drafting for days, attaching all the evidence to the authorities, the bank, and even a few of the man's known associates he had managed to track down. By the time Claire left that hotel room, her entire world would already be crumbling. When she finally emerged, she looked over her shoulder nervously, clutching her coat tighter around her. Ethan waited until her eyes met his across the parking lot. For a brief, frozen moment, recognition flashed in her gaze, then fear. She knew he had seen through her, that the game was over. Ethan didn't shout or confront her. He didn't need to. The sound of approaching sirens filled the night air, red and blue lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Claire's face drained of color as the reality set in. The lies, the secrets, the double life. It was all collapsing around her, just as the man had warned her it would. Ethan stood tall in the shadows, no longer the blind, trusting husband she thought she'd control. He had become something sharper, colder. He didn't feel pity as the police closed in, didn't feel sorrow as Claire was led away in handcuffs, her pleading eyes searching for mercy she would never find. All he felt was the calm satisfaction of a man who had taken back his power. His wife's dark secret had shattered everything he once believed in, but in the end, it had forged him into someone stronger. Betrayal had broken him, yes, but revenge had rebuilt him.